Hi everybody, it's Geordie from Geordie Colours. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm doing something a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I'm sharing how I use my Distress Watercolor Pencils. I'm going to be working in this book, Nounours Therapy by Diane Dufour. Translates to teddy bear therapy, I believe. And I've chosen to do this page. I thought it was a nice kind of spring page, but perhaps it's more summery really. But anyway, I decided it was a good one. I have a piece of cardstock in the back there just to protect my page, and I've put a piece of paper masking tape down the edge there because this image goes right to the edge and I want to make sure that I don't transfer colour onto the next page. So there's my Distress Watercolor Pencils, that's my colour chart, so I'm going to be referring to that as I go through. I'm going to start with the sky, and I'm using tumbled glass for my sky. Tumbled glass is a really soft pale blue, and I want to keep this fairly simple. So I'm going to be doing this page entirely in Distress Watercolor Pencils. I would probably normally add a bit of coloured pencil on the top to add a little bit more depth, but I decided just to show you what you can do with just the watercolor pencils. They work a little bit, I guess, like Inktense, but obviously not as intense as the name would suggest. So they're quite soft. They do dry perhaps slightly lighter than the colour that you layer on. So just ever so slightly, but they don't dry darker. I know some watercolours and watercolour pencils actually dry darker once you've activated them. These ones don't. They stay roughly the same, if not a little bit lighter. So I'm just using the tumbled glass there to colour in the sky area. I'm trying to go in between all those leaves. I did sharpen my pencil there. I've just got a really basic sharpener that I use for these, and I just keep it especially for these Distress Watercolor Pencils. And I just sharpen it, and they do manage to get to a fairly fine point. If you are so inclined, you can keep the sharpenings and use them like a watercolor if you wanted to. I don't bother with that, but it's an option. And obviously it could be a little bit more economical rather than just throwing it out. But yeah, just applying these. I'm going in with a fairly heavy hand with this colour because, as I say, it is a very, very pale, and the colour will dry perhaps even slightly paler than what you see on the camera there. I just trying to cover all the areas that I want to add that blue into, and I will go ahead and speed this up so you don't have to sit here watching me do this whole page. So most of this video will be sped up. There will be bits that I will slow down and talk through, but for the most part I'm just kind of speeding everything up so that you can see how I go about using these. So I did end up only getting a little bit of this colouring on camera. I got interrupted and ended up finishing it off camera, but that is the blue all laid in. It's not activated yet, so I'm using this Staedtler water brush here to activate the colour. So what I like to do is squeeze a bit out onto a paper towel, make sure that it's running, and then kind of dry it off a little bit so that I just get a bit of dampness when I run it across the back of my hand. I don't want it to be soaking wet. I don't want loads of water. This isn't watercolour paper, but it does hold up pretty well to it. But I want to keep it relatively, I'm not going to say dry because it's not dry, but not too wet. I want to keep it quite kind of controlled with the amount of water that I use. So I'm just, as I say, activating all of that, and I will show that on camera, but I will speed it up. Okay, so I've pretty much finished all of that watercolor now, and you can see what it looks like activated. It's a very soft blue, as I say. I'm going to leave that bit to dry now. I'm just showing you the back there. It hasn't bled through at all. The page is perhaps slightly wrinkled, but it's not too bad. I'm going to move on to the tree trunk now, and I'm using the ground espresso color. And again, just kind of colouring over the area I want to, and then I will activate with water. I can be relatively messy with this because I will go back with second coats of everything, so it doesn't need to be perfect the first time round. And remember, with watercolour, it's meant to look a little bit kind of loose and not quite so finely detailed as it does with pencil perhaps. So yeah, I'm just kind of activating that again, and I'll go over the entire tree trunk, and then I will leave that area to dry, and I'll move on to my next piece. So once I've got all of that done, I'm going to choose my next colour, and this time I'm going into the I think it's the grass I did next. I can't remember now. It might have been the tree. So I'm fiddling around there trying to choose my pencil. And it is the grass. So I chose Mowed Lawn for this area. Thought that was the perfect colour for the grass. Again, I'm just rubbing it on pretty roughly. It doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. You can definitely go back and add layers as you want to. So I'm just going in fairly rough, and then I will activate this part as well. Okay, so I'm just finishing up the last bit of that grass there and trying to blend it out, trying to keep it as smooth as possible, but again, not too worried because I will be going back with a second coat of everything, so it will smooth out any inconsistencies. But there we go, that's the grass all done. I'm going to move on to the water now. So I'm pulling out my my swatch sheet here to have a look at what colour I'm going to use. I think I'm going to go with more of that kind of greenish blue. So I've decided to go in with salvaged patina, which is a kind of turquoisey blue rather than a true blue. And again, just going to sharpen it slightly and then rub it all over the area I want to colour. Again, going fairly rough and ready, not taking too much time over this. It doesn't, as I say, time and time again, does not need to be perfect. It just needs to kind of fill in all of that white area and colour it with the colour. So then I'm going to go back in, activate it again with water, and then I'll leave that area to dry while I move on to the next part. Okay, so the water's all done. You can see I've activated everything. I'm going to go in and look at my bear now. So pulling out my swatch chart again, and I think I'm going to go in with that walnut stain. It's a bit of a kind of greyish brown colour, but I thought that would look quite nice on my bear. So for this guy, I'm going to add some shading to certain areas and then leave parts of him kind of white. I don't want him to get really dark, so I'm just going to add some shading to the bottom areas of him, and I'm going to leave like his little face area there and kind of the top of his tummy and the tops of the curves of his legs free of colour. I will drag the colour up ever so slightly just so it blends out to nothing, but I want to try and keep it quite soft. I don't want to add huge amounts of colour to all over him. I just want to add a little bit of shading around the bottom edges of him and kind of where the darkest area, where the shadows are going to be. So then once that is done, I will again activate with water and get him all completed. Okay, so I'm just finishing up my bear here. As you can see, I've left those areas nice and white so that he's got a contrast between the shadowed areas and the areas that would be more in light. I'm going to leave him there for now. I can go back to him later. And I'm going to move on to my reeds or my bulrushes. And I'm going to start with the top parts of them. And I'm using the brushed corduroy colour. Again, just sharpening it a little bit so I can get into the finer details. And I'm just adding this really quickly all over the top of those kind of bulrushes. And then I will activate with water. So these are pretty quick and simple to do. Again, I will go back later and add more detail and depth to them. But just for now, it's just a quick coat of colour. So basically, I am at this stage just basing everything with colour. Now, once you've based everything, you could, of course, go in with pencil to add details and shading, which is something I like to do quite regularly. But today I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use more of my Distress Watercolor Pencils to add some shading and depth to everything. It probably won't turn out as vibrant as if you did use pencils on top, but for this page I just kind of wanted to show you what you could do with watercolor pencils. Again, I'm not an expert, so there are probably people out there who can do a lot better than me, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how I use them and what you can do with them. Like any watercolor, the key is adding layers, lots of different layers. The more layers you add, the more depth and colour you will get, the more vibrant it will be. So for mine, I didn't do loads of layers. I didn't want to make this video really long, but I did add little bits of detail here and there, which you will see later on in the video, but just wanted to give you an idea of how you could use these Distress watercolor pencils. So for the tree, I'm using Twisted Citron, which is a nice kind of limey green color. And again, just adding that to all of those little leaves, and then I'll go ahead and activate with water. So that's the tree done, but while I had that Twisted Citron out, I decided to add it to my water pads, or my lily pads rather, down here. So I'm going to just add the colour there quickly, and then I will go ahead and activate with water again. Then I'm going to move on to the leaves of my bulrushes or reeds here, and I decided to go with an olivey green colour for those. So I'm going to use that forest moss colour for that. Again, I'm going to be adding kind of different things on top. This is just a base layer, so it looks pretty flat to begin with, but as I say, this is just basing. So again, it's like if you use Tombow dual brush pens or alcohol markers on a book or anything like that, you first add your base and then you go back and add depth and shadow on top. So it's exactly the same thing with using these Distress watercolor pencils. And as I say, you can use different methods of adding the shading and depth on top. But today I'm just going to be using the Distress watercolor pencils. But again, you could add pencil detail, or you could even use like fine liners or anything you fancied, really. It just depends what you prefer. But I really enjoy just using the watercolors. I find it quite a relaxing way to color. It's a little bit easier on your hands. It doesn't kind of take quite so much effort to hold the pencil and press down. It's quite a nice, gentle way of coloring. So it's good if you're having a little bit of hand pain or anything like that. It's a nice way to kind of give your hand a little bit of a break. Okay, so I'm just about finished basing everything. I'm just going to do my little frog down here quickly with some Lucky Clover. So this is kind of more of a bluish green rather than the yellowish greenish colours that I've used in other areas on this page. And once he is done and activated, I'll then do my little butterfly up there. Again, I'm just going to use one shade of colour for that for now, but I will go back with other things later. So I'm going to use Wilted Violet for my little butterfly. I decided to make it purple, just to add a little pop of colour in there, but nothing too drastic. There's lots of green on this page, lots of different shades of green, so it's nice to have one little pop of colour there in the centre of my page. Okay, so everything is now based, and I did forget, I'm going to add a little bit of pink to the ear and the mouth of my little frog. That was Spun Sugar Distress Watercolor Pencil. So that's everything based. Everything is ready to go. I did decide to add a little bit of colour just to that lighter part of my bear's face. So I used pumice stone, which is kind of it's a brownish grey colour, but it worked quite nicely with the walnut stain that I had already used. So I just wanted to add a little bit of colour, but nothing too dark. So there you go. You can see that my page is completely based. There's no bleed through on the other side. Now it's time to go back and add some more details. So I'm going to use, I'm going to start in the sky. I'm going to use the same colour as what I already used in the sky, which is the tumbled glass. But this time I'm going to be picking up directly from the pencil to add a little bit of depth and shading in certain areas. Now, I don't want to do too much to my sky. I don't want it to be too bright or anything like that. Just adding a touch of shading towards the top part. I will add a little bit around the tree, and I'll also add a little bit of darker blue around the bottom where my bear is lying in the grass. But just to add a little slight contrast. Hopefully you can see there the difference that it makes. It's not huge, but again, I don't want to make a massive difference with this. I just want a really soft sky, so I decided just to do this and keep it fairly simple. You could, of course, if you wanted, go in with a darker shade of blue and add some depth that way, but I decided just to use the same shade and just go over certain areas to add a little bit of depth, but it's not going to be a hugely dramatic difference. So, but it depends on the look you want. If you want to make it more dramatic, then go for a darker colour. Okay, so finished with that blue. So I'm just drying the tip of the pencil off on some paper towel and then cleaning my brush on some paper towel as well. Now I'm going to go back into my tree. Again, I'm using the same colour that I used to base everything, which is the walnut stain. And I'm just going to add a little bit of shadow and depth here and there. So I'm basically following the lines that the artist has drawn on the page for the kind of tree trunk and the wood texture, and I'm just following that with my water brush. Now, I'm not a particularly careful watercolorist. I am not very skilled in watercoloring, so you might be able to do a much finer job than me. I kind of just follow the lines and go where the mood takes me, but yeah, I'm not particularly neat or anything like that, so you might be better than me and maybe be able to get finer lines, but I think it looks quite nice. So I've finished with that, and now I'm going back in with my mowed lawn, and again I'm just going to do the same thing. So it's the same shade that I used to base everything, but I'm using it direct from the pencil this time to add a little bit more contrast and depth. Again, following the lines that the artist has drawn and just adding some flicks in to create the texture of grass. I probably, in hindsight, I probably should have started by adding a layer of the mowed lawn over this grass again, because to me it looks a little bit patchy, and I did end up going back and doing that later, but perhaps I should have done it at this stage and then waited to do this part of my kind of adding some texture and shading. So adding shading around where the bear is lying, because obviously that he would create a bit of a shadow in the grass where he's lying, and I will add a little bit of shading around the bottom edge where the water meets the grass as well. But yeah, pretty straightforward, nothing too difficult or complex here. Okay, so that's completed. Again, I wiped off my pencil, and now I'm going back in to my tree leaves here with the Twisted Citron. Again, it's the same color that I based it with, but this time I'm just adding a touch more color to the very tops of my leaves and to any leaves that are kind of behind others, so that it creates a look of shadow. And I think you can already see the kind of difference it makes just by adding that little touch of color. It's not difficult to do, but it just adds a little bit of something. It just makes it look less flat. So I'm pretty much finished with my leaves there, and now I'm going to go back into the water. This time I'm using a darker shade, so I used the salvaged patina colour to base the water with. Now I'm going in with peacock feathers, which is a similar shade but a bit darker, and I'm just going to add some shading all around where the water meets the grass there, and then also again just follow the lines that the artist has drawn and add some depth and shadow in those areas as well. Now you could be a bit more fancy than me and add some white gel pen details where those water ripples are instead of making them darker, and then add darker patches in other areas, but I just decided to keep things very simple today. Again, it's just to kind of show you how you can use your Distress watercolor pencils. Again, I'm not an expert, but I just find them a lot of fun to use, and I think that you can create a fun little picture with them. So I'm just going back again. It's still a little bit wet, but I just wanted to add a little bit more depth where that edge of the water meets the grass. Okay, so that's the water all done. Now, this is where I decided that I needed to go back in and add a second layer of the mowed lawn to my grass. I just felt like it was looking a little bit too patchy, so I probably should have done this first, but you live and learn. So I'm just going back and activating that again. You can still see where I've added the pencil direct to the paper from the watercolor brush. Does that make sense? But I will go back and darken those areas up again. I just wanted to try and smooth it out a little bit more. I felt like it was looking a little bit too patchy. I'm not sure it makes a massive difference, but I just felt like it needed it. Okay, so that's done, nice and quick and easy. And now I'm going on to the reeds again. So again, just using the exact same colour that I used to base with, which is the brushed corduroy, and I'm just adding some shadow to those reeds, just along one side and the base of them, or the tops of these reeds or bulrushes. And then I will kind of decide what to do next. I was thinking about just leaving them like that, but I felt like they needed a little extra pop of something, so I decided to pull out a yellow shade to add a little bit of lightness to them as well. So I pulled out let me see, I think it was the mustard seed. Yeah, mustard seed. So on the opposite side to the part where I added that shading, I'm adding the mustard seed. Now, again, I'm not sure that it makes a massive difference, but I did end up going back in with a third colour on the tops of these bulrushes. But I just wanted to add a little touch of that yellow to make them pop a little bit more. I did add a little touch of that yellow to my little frog's belly as well, just to create a little bit of contrast. And then I decided while I had that mustard seed colour out, I would just add a dot of that yellow colour to the very base of the leaves on my trees. Again, it doesn't make a huge difference, but I do think it just helps everything pop a little bit more, just adds a bit more dimension and just makes it look a little less flat than if you just kind of have it one colour. Okay, so I'm finished with that mustard seed colour now. Again, I'm cleaning it off and popping it away. And this is where I decided to pull out a darker colour for the edge of my reeds there, just to make them a little bit more dimensional. So this is the walnut stain, I think, or is it no, sorry, it's the ground espresso, which is the same colour as I used on the tree trunk. So I decided just to pull a little bit of that out, and I'm using it quite concentrated just to add that shadow around the edge of my reeds. And again, I think it just helps make it look a bit more dimensional and pop a little bit. While I had that colour out, I decided to use it to add some shadow to my bear. Initially, I was just going to add it in a couple of little places, but then I decided to go a little bit crazy with it and added it all the way around in the shaded, all the shady areas of my bear. So all along the base of him there, around his face, around his legs. Again, avoiding that tummy area. I want to keep that nice and light, but I just thought that this added a little bit more depth to him, and a little bit more shadow where it needed. I haven't finished with him yet, though. I will add more of the walnut stain colour, which is what I originally based him with, but I just wanted to add a little touch of this to kind of bring a little bit more depth to him, because I felt like he was still looking a little bit flat. Okay, so I finished adding that ground espresso. Now I'm going back in again with the walnut stain, again adding more depth and shadow where I already have placed it, but I just want to kind of enhance that and make it kind of stand out and pop a little bit more. Adding a little bit more around his face area as well, and kind of heading a little bit further into his tummy and those areas that I've left white. But again, I don't want to colour the whole thing in. I want to keep those areas a little bit lighter so that it does look like part of him is in shadow and part of him is kind of catching the light from the sun, which I am kind of basing on being pretty much directly above him in the sky. So kind of we're talking about like midday. that's what I'm thinking of. So yeah, again, just picking it up off the pencil, adding it where I want it, spreading it out and trying to blend it out, but then going back again to enhance some of the shadows and make them stand out a little bit more. Okay, so once I'm happy with the brown for my bear, I'm going in with some more of that spun sugar just to add to his ear, and then I'm going to add a little bit to a cheek, or a hint of a cheek there to him as well, just trying to kind of brighten up his face a little bit. I did feel like his eye looked a bit like narrowed, like it almost looked like he was a little bit angry, but yeah, I kind of just went with that, thought it was okay. Now it's on to the reeds. Again, I'm using that same forest moss colour to add some shading. My camera did cut out, I'd run out of storage space, so I missed a few leaves there, but I'm just doing exactly the same thing, just adding some shading and shadow to various areas. I'm trying to follow the lines of the art that the artist has drawn. It's a little bit looser at the back there. Behind the bear, the reeds aren't quite so obvious as to where they go. There's just kind of some lines without them kind of ending in leaves or anything. So I just kind of used my imagination and filled in areas and made it look like leaves and left other areas kind of where the blue is. But yeah, I just kind of went fairly loose with it at the back there, wasn't too worried about it. Just adding, like I say, some darker areas and leaving some areas a bit lighter. It was a little bit hard to work on the edge of the page because it kept trying to flick up, so I was trying to hold it down. But just, yeah, fairly loose, and adding that to the top of my reeds as well. Then I decided that I needed a little bit more colour, so I used this Rustic Wilderness, which is more of a deeper kind of yellowish green, I guess. And I'm adding that to certain areas, again, just to try and create a little bit more depth. And then I decided that it needed something else as well. So I decided to add a little touch of red to the leaves of my reeds. I went with a brownish red. It's called Fired Brick. And I just wanted to add a little bit of something to kind of break it up a little bit. I felt like it was almost too much green on the page, and I wanted to brighten it up with something else. So I decided that I'd try it and see how it went, and I actually kind of liked the way that it ended up looking. So I'm kind of adding that red to the areas which are more in the light, I suppose. But I do think it just adds a little touch of something and makes it look a little less boring, a little less green. Not that green's boring, but you know what I mean? There's a lot of it on this page. So I just wanted to add a touch of colour to brighten it all up a little bit. So once that was done, I decided to add a little bit of that mowed lawn colour to my lily pads, again, just to try and create an impression of a shadow and a shade in certain areas. They're quite small areas though, so it's, you know, and I'm not the best with a watercolour brush, so you might be a little less heavy-handed than me. And then I decided to go in with the Lucky Clover colour and add that to my grass area, just to, again, try and add some little strands of grass here and there. I'm trying to be precise with my brush, but I'm not very good at it. It kind of, in some areas it turned out really good, in other areas it was a little bit kind of thick. The lines were a little bit too thick. I was trying to use the very tip of my brush, but as I say, I'm not an expert at this by any stretch of the imagination, but I did like that added kind of a deeper colour of green there, which just kind of helped those little grass blades pop. And again, I just added a touch of that Lucky Clover colour to the edge of the grass where the grass meets the water, again, just to add a little bit of interest to that bottom area there. Once that was done, I felt like I was pretty much finished with my page. Again, this is just an idea of how you can use the Distress Watercolor Pencils, but you could definitely go in with some pencils, normal pencils, to add shading and more depth and more texture, and like the fur of the bear. I decided just to leave it at that and then just add a little bit of metallic watercolor. So I have these beautiful Aiuli, I think that's how you say them, watercolors. I got them recently and just love them, so I'm using them all the time. So what I do is I just add a little bit of water and I let them sit for a little while, and then I add them to the areas that I want. So I'm using this lovely green for my frog there. I just want to make him kind of pop and shine a little bit. I'm using some pretty purple on my butterfly there, and I will add some metallic or some Sakura Jelly Roll Stardust to certain areas as well, just to make it pop a little bit more. I'm adding some of this lovely mustard yellow colour to the edge of my reeds, and that is pretty much it for the metallic watercolour. I'm not sure if you can see that shine there, but in real life it is beautiful. Then I decided, well, actually, I'm going to add a little bit to the water as well. So I have this lovely turquoisey blue. It's called Blue Tide, and I thought it worked really well for the water. And I'm just kind of going over those darker areas where the lines are and around the edge where the grass meets the water, just again to add a little bit of shimmer and shine and make a little bit of fun on the page. Then I decided to try and use some of my jelly roll in white, but for some reason it really did not want to work on the watercolor. I do find I struggle with the jelly roll on any watercolor, so I pulled out my Pentel Signo Uniball pen instead, and again I still struggled with it. I tried to I wanted to add a few flicks of white to my grass areas. It didn't work particularly well. I tried rubbing my pen on my finger to get it working. I did manage to get a few little streaks in here and there, but I don't know that it's made that much of a difference. I add a little bit of detail to the frog's eyes and to his legs, just to add a little kind of look of highlight on him, because he is pretty much all one color, so I wanted to add a little bit of something to him. And then I pulled out my Sakura Jelly Roll Stardust pens. I've got the purple one there to add some dots to my butterfly. I've got this lovely green to add some dots to my frog. I'm not sure that it shows up particularly well on that. And then I used a black Jelly Roll pen to add some depth to my bear's nose, to my butterfly's kind of body, to the little eyes on my critters there. And then I went back in with the white to sharpen up his eye a little bit. Pulling up the masking tape, pulling out my backing paper, and that is my little picture complete. This really didn't take very long at all. It probably, in total, it took me about 2 hours. It was just relaxing and fun to do, and I just wanted to show you how I use my Distress Watercolor Pencils. Like I say, I'm no expert, but I do enjoy using them, and I had a lot of fun with this page. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. Please do subscribe to my channel. I'd love to see you come back again, and thanks so much. Take care.